Just before I get started, everybody, welcome. I'm just going to perform a quick audio and visual check. If you can confirm you can see the red slide there, property investment event, and hear me correctly, that would be great. There is a chat panel over in the right-hand side of your screen. Make sure you select a question or a chat and it will come through to me that you can hear okay. So it won't be a few moments, we'll get started very promptly today. Okay, welcome everybody. My name's Jacob Field. Thank you for your prompt arrival. I will get started. There usually are some stragglers who arrive just after the starting time, but I understand a lot of you will probably be on your lunch break with your lunch in front of you. I'll have mine after, so I'll get started right on time. If you have any audio-visual problems, do let me know in the chat bar, which is over on the right-hand side. I have done a bit of a sound test already, and a few of you, hi Jane, Bill, Jason, thanks for saying yes, you can hear okay in that early test. You can refresh the browser if you do have drop-in and outs, and you can refresh or change the size of the browser window to change the resolution of the image, which might clear things up a little bit if there are problems. So I'll jump right in. There will be a recording of this sent through, so if you do miss the last bit today, that will be sent through, and there will be a question and answer time at the end of today's session. Getting started, I will jump through things really quickly today. I wanted to spend quite a bit of time going through Liverpool. Going back a few months, there's been quite a few of you asking about Liverpool. It's always been second or third on the list of areas people wanted to focus on. I do ask the question every week, or when I do hold the week casts, which area people would like to focus on. Liverpool is always up there. It's been a lot of Morayfield, Caloundra, Logan, Ipswich lately, which was the number first choice out of everybody. Liverpool's always been there. This week, when we did ask the question in our Facebook group, so thank you to all those who did jump in there and ask and comment. Liverpool won, and lots of you looking at and talking and investing in Liverpool. So we are focusing on that today. Going through another couple of things. So we've had a recent webcast infographic series, which is called The Myth of Capital Growth. I've really broken things down to a common sense approach to how to find suburbs that are primed at the right time in the property clock for capital growth. Then going down to a street level, how can we find sweet spots in the suburb to amplify our capital growth? And then potentially some strategies and some techniques we can use to negotiate effectively, assess fair market value, and potentially leverage information to negotiate under. I'll just do a summary of that today, go through some of the content there, jump into our national top 10 sweet spot report, more about that in a moment, and then obviously the zoom into Liverpool. A little bit about me. So I first started investing quite a while ago now at 19, own property across Australia. I would classify myself as a DIY property investor. So I really do pride myself and I suppose focus on empowering myself with knowledge and education in property. So I can repeat that education over and over again for each subsequent property purchase. So I'm always trying to build that network, that information set, the tool set to be able to thrive and move forward, empowering myself with knowledge. And that's something you can do, and we can do it as, I suppose, DIY property investors in helping each other to process that knowledge, support each other, and make clear and concise decisions with confidence. So that's my approach. I obviously made mistakes in the past. I have, probably overcapitalized. I've focused too heavily on capital growth without the yields and realized, and then overcompensated back in the other direction. But I've always learned from those changes intact and made them when necessary. To that end, Right House was founded by me in 2011 to assist me originally as a research tool. Realised it had mass appeal, and this sort of level of granular street level information is absolute gold. So opened it up to everybody, and this is, I suppose, the end result of all the research and tools and thinking that we've done over the years. So that's a little bit about me, just setting the scene. Moving right into the Right House news desk, what's been happening around here lately. As I say, we've just released the third part of our Myth of Capital Growth infographic series. So that's available on the Right House blog, righthouse.com.au/blog. Check out the blog post there and get involved with conversation around those infographics. If you've got any questions, jump into the support on the page there and we can answer them. Big scoop and big announcement. I have been hinting at it lately and I've sort of been gagged. We were, Terry Ryder from hotspotting.com.au and myself were featured in the cover story on Money Magazine this month. That's September. 133 best streets in the hottest suburbs. So Terry did his hotspotting in the regional level, found 10 suburbs or regions that were really primed for absolute growth. He did actually supply me with a list of 20 of them, and it was only roughly 10 of them where I actually found really nice, clear, sweet spots that are going to give us lots of confidence in amplifying capital growth in that that region. There may have been a lot of suburbs where the owner-occupier mix, tenant demand, public housing, rental mix just didn't really give us the confidence. Came down to, the cream of the crop, those 10 suburbs found in this report and this featured article within the magazine. And then I drilled down to 133 streets that I identified. More on that methodology in the moment, and more on the importance of that because that was tied together into the National Top 10 Sweet Spot report, which I'll cover in a moment. So big scoop there, really nice, and I'm really pleased to be able to announce that news. So do check out Money Magazine newsstand. Jumping in really quickly, once again, I am aware of time, so I do want to sort of cover off this, content and just get the ground level understanding clear. The first instalment in the Myth of Capital Growth infographic was really trying to set the scene about where you can go for information, who you're sort of listening to, what is real information, bringing it back to a common sense approach, letting logic dictate without any fear, and then potentially breaking things down to how can we assess suburbs and regions to see where they are on the property clock and what is the upside for them. So there's lots of information in that infographic. Just to summarise, I suppose I didn't realise there was that transition there. Just to, I constantly sort of see this out there, with so many different sources of property information, so many people's motives, so many reasons why people are trying to get you to listen to them and potentially buy through them, etc. Really look down to the motives of it, because a lot of companies, a lot of businesses, a lot of people that you might listen to try and make property investments sound like this secret sauce or this black box where you don't know the inputs. They make it seem like a very advanced science, and obviously there's a lot of risk and information does need to be thought through and due diligence does need to be done. But that can be achieved together and with information and education. So looking at what the end objective or motive for these individuals or organisations is, are they a wolf in sheep's clothing there, as the image sort of displays? ACCC did pull up 86 property spruikers. This is direct quote from the Australian back in I think that was end of July or end of August, where everything might not be as it seems. So it's just stop and think. Why are people telling you what they're telling you? And what are some good, reliable sources of information, which I can touch on in a moment as well with sort of people and providers that I respect in the industry. I guess the theme after that is, don't feel like it's something that you cannot achieve without preparation and education and understanding. You can do this is how I approach things. That's the first response to a problem that I come across in property is, yes, I can do this. It defaults back to that. Then if I can't, then I'll pay or learn or research to work out how I can do it. Stripping things back to a common sense approach. I go at 3 levels. I think it's absolutely critical that you do that. Depending on other sources of information, the mass media, etc., they might only focus on one level. When I say 3 levels, I'm talking a region and suburb level. Where are those regions and suburbs on the property clock, and why are the reasons for it being at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock on the property clock or not? Once you've got those regions, understanding them as a local would. So becoming local area experts. If you're opening yourself up to potentially investing across the whole of the country for the absolute maximum upside, how can you understand these locations? How can you find the streets in these suburbs that are going to be the capital growth sweet spots, and avoid the areas that you potentially want to avoid? This is not rocket science, and I'm bringing it back to you can do this because you know the streets in the suburb that you live in potentially that are going to deliver really nice environment for growth. You know the areas that people are avoiding still, and they always will. Just applying that common sense approach to other regions across the country. So common sense approach, let's look for regions and the whys about why they're primed for growth. Let's look for streets and sweet spots, and then look at the individual property. What can we do there, comparing apples with apples, and not muddying the water with unclear information, real estate agents throwing them off the scents. Let's look at some motives there. Let's look at some clear information and how we can leverage that information to potentially negotiate under market, which I'll go through as well a little bit later. Just going through really quickly, this is the first probably big #1 myth of capital growth. you've got a lot of sources of information that do demonstrate and pride themselves on providing you with historic growth figures. At Ripe House, we have a large data set. We've been tracking for sale, for rent and sold listings across the country for 3 years. We're mapping that down to a street level. We're mapping it back to a property type, public housing, and distance to amenities, all of the key metrics. We've got the relationship between them all. We have vetted this and confirmed, but it is a pretty big assumption that is sort of backed up by common sense. So that's where I suppose these assumptions come from to start with, is common sense, and it is coming back to that. What causes capital growth? I can get to those questions in a minute, Bill and Bruno. I'll jump into that at the end. Karen, if your visual is out of focus, try resizing your browser in and out, smaller and bigger. If not, refresh the browser. Yeah, jumping in, this is the first big myth of capital growth. Why is capital growth going to occur? It's to do with an underlying demand-supply imbalance. Okay, so demand is increasing, supply may be stagnant, hasn't started moving yet, developers haven't started moving in yet, demand is outstripping supply. What is causing that? So I've got two columns there. Utility is causing demand. So when you hear about the latest news article, infrastructure spend, government spend, private spend, employment spend, it's basically all coming back to added utility for residents or want-to-be residents living in that suburb. It can just be summarised in that way. So the new, when you're looking at that and you're thinking of it as utility, it makes things a little bit easier because, when the government announces a new $2 billion infrastructure spend that's going to affect the catchment area, the region, when's that growth going to occur? It may occur when they make the announcement. It may occur when they turn the soil over and start digging. It may occur when it's finished, or it may occur when lots of people start realising this is a nice, quick way to get into the CBD. So we don't know that. The utility is very varied. There can be lots of reasons for it. A suburb may be gentrifying. It may be becoming, a wider appeal. There may be further demographics, or the demographic spread is widening. Lots more people wanting to live there. Then the suburb next door, because of the gentrification, may be the ugly duckling. It may have a ripple effect with price and being pulled up next door, and I define that as utility as well. So all of these reasons for utility are there in the market. They create extra demand. So demand above and beyond the current level of demand. Okay, so that's going to be a future driver of growth. So previous price growth has been caused by utility and extra demand above and beyond current demand. That may now be priced in to the price on the ground today. So looking at that growth is no indication that this future growth is going to occur. The demand-supply imbalance may be now equalised. What we need to do is we need to look at cause and effect. And the current cause is utility and that demand that's been caused by the utility, and the effect is buy signals. On the ground, in the market today, current on-market buy signals. So two big ones that we can look for are sales volumes trending upwards. So that's a really big sign that this demand is starting to now translate into purchases clearing the books. The price point has been met by the demand. The current price point has been met by demand. Prices haven't necessarily started moving yet, but sales are starting to trend upwards. That's a seasonal trending as well, and that's a relative trending compared to other suburbs in a similar catchment area. When you combine that with rent per week increasing, it's very, very powerful combination. So that's a leading indicator. People are starting to pay more to live in a suburb. So there's not just demand in a suburb, but that demand is starting to translate to people wanting to pay more to rent. That's going to do one thing. It's obviously going to increase yields if prices haven't started moving yet. It's going to increase investor demand, which is going to increase the buying pool and demand once again. But it's a leading indicator that people are starting to pay more to live to rent. And that's going to also potentially lead to people wanting to pay more to live and buy in the suburbs. So let's look at cause and effect. And then the final effect, obviously, is growth. Sometimes we don't know the time lag. Generally when we're looking at this type of research, cause and effect, it's short-term demand supply imbalance, which is 6 to 12 months, leading indicator of growth. That's the first myth that I just wanted to bust that bubble a little bit. Don't look at previous growth history. Don't use that overly use it in your decision-making process of future growth. Because the area has been previously underperformer, overperformer, it really doesn't have a huge effect to future growth. So let's just clear that off the table right now. Second myth is seeking out capital growth locations. So when you've found these property or regions on the 7 o'clock on the property clock, So I'm just noting your comment there, Jane. If you can, yeah, just try recessing the browser in and out. It does refresh the resolution. I'll be sending through the slides and recording afterwards as well. Let me try readjusting the resolution from this side and see if that clears things up. So this is the second myth. So once you've found these regions at 7 or 8 o'clock on the property clock, just to answer your question there directly, Bill, the property clock I'm defining as in 12 o'clock on the property clock is oversupply, or you've got very low days on market. You've got sales volumes which have peaked and now sort of on the way down. You've got rent which has peaked and now quite stable. You've got rental volumes that are quite stable. Growth has occurred. Growth is slowing down. Growth is starting to be neutralised. 6 o'clock on the property clock, you're not quite certain or sure that the market is now going to really progress through into the 7 and 8 on the property clock, but you've got rents starting to trend upwards. You've got sales volume starting to trend upwards, and you've got days on market stable and decreasing. That's an indication of 7 or 8 o'clock on the property clock at a suburban regional level. Second myth of capital growth here, I'm just making sure that this is still coming through this visual, excuse me there, to everyone. I was just trying to adjust the resolution there. Yeah, so sorry for the interruption there. Second myth is all streets are created equal. So we've done the hard work and we've found a region or suburb anywhere across the country. It might be just around the corner that's looking like it's going to achieve above and beyond capital growth. We haven't done all of the work we need to do yet. We need to find the individual streets within that suburb that are going to lead that growth, that are going to amplify the growth. And we've been doing some amazing research at Ripe House recently, which demonstrate the importance of this. And that's what we're calling the Ripe House sweet spots, because this graphic is taken directly from the second myth of capital growth infographic. So check out the blog there once again for that. But all streets are not created equal. Now, just before I sort of mention the numbers, it's just going to give you a little bit of an idea. According to our research, we've got a lot of power with the data that we have here at Ripe House. We've tracked sales across the last 3 years. We've mapped them back to distance away from the closest amenities. We've checked it for schools, for hospitals, for parks, for cafes, etc. These are the big 3 amenities which affect demand and willingness to pay for property. And we've mapped it down to the distance away from each of these. So closest transport, right on the doorstep is good. 1,100 metres is the absolute sweet spot distance from a local transport hub. Schools, 250 metres. Shopping, anywhere up to around 1,200 metres is okay. Okay, so that's telling you how much you'd expect to pay above and beyond the mean or the average price for distance away from shops. Anywhere after 1,500 metres, you're really dropping off a cliff there as far as willingness to pay. Public housing is another really big one. So expect to pay 25% more than the average in a street that has 0% public housing. And if the street has 18% or more public housing, expect to pay 20% less than the suburb average. So these graphs are really just demonstrating to you the importance of knowing what is in the street, because it really does change your value proposition for the property, your willingness to pay. You need to be comparing apples with apples. So properties in similar locations, etc., can drastically change your appraised value and potentially negotiate under that. Those graphics were just really trying to establish how location can affect property. But the big one that we talk about at Ripe House is the Ripe House sweet spot. Okay, so what I'm talking about here is a street within the suburb that has low public housing. So based on the purchase price, the middle class, upper class, lower class of the suburb, that public housing number changes anywhere from a maximum of 5% public housing all the way through to a maximum of 15% public housing, according to our research. So the sweet spot combines low public housing with lots of the in-demand property type in that street. So if houses, 3-bedroom houses are most in demand at the moment by tenants and residents of the suburb, let's make sure we've got lots of that in that street. And then you combine it with the tenant sweet spot, which is a real powerful combination. It cannot be understated. The combination of these 3 things, according to our research, is absolutely huge. So, and it doesn't happen very often. It's you're not really going to find high rents and high yields together. And you're not really going to find high rents and high tenant demand together. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. And our software and our research can show you how to find it very quickly. So all of these things together, high rent, high percentage of tenant demand, high yield, in combination with lots of the in-demand property type and low public housing, results in a Ripe House sweet spot. And why is this important? Well, we've gone over the last 3 months, running all of our data, tracking individual sales, every single sale across the country for the 3 months up until the start of September. We've compared that to the last year, and we've put every one of those sales in or out of the relevant sweet spots within each suburb. Now, for each suburb across Australia, 85% of the suburb is outside of a sweet spot, and only 15% of that each of those suburbs, or the average of suburbs across Australia, is a sweet spot. So we're only talking about a small section of each suburb. If you bought in those streets, in those sweet spots, the capital growth would have outperformed the remainder of the suburb by 21.9%. And that cannot be understated. So that's not saying you had 24% growth for that quarter. The average suburb growth across all of our data set for the 3 months up to September was a rough just over 3% growth. So great growth, on the back of a lot of growth in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. But if you invested in that 15% of the suburbs, which are the right house sweet spots, you would have had over 4% capital growth in that 3 month period, and a huge differential yet. That's been vetted and checked backwards as well. We're really excited to be announcing the concept of how you can amplify your capital growth if you're getting that street level stuff right. It doesn't need to be a black box. All I'm doing here is taking a common sense approach. So I'm not really looking at previous growth to signify or correlate to future growth. That's a bit of a no-brainer when you think about it. I'm talking about how individual streets are in sweet spots, which is, this because you're living in a suburb which has sweet spots and areas that you wouldn't touch, and how those areas that are sweet spots are really, a really nice mix of tenant demand, owner-occupier demand, high rents, high yields. You can see why people want to live there, but great amenities. It's always going to be like that. You can assess that when you're a local and when you know the area. How can you do it in these remote, unfamiliar, but fast-moving, with huge upside markets? That's what we're going to talk about now, is gaining a mindset where we can improve our due diligence process each day. We can leverage some tools that can help us to do that, to gain a local mindset in these suburbs that we're not overly familiar with. When we do that, we gain that local mindset, we can potentially negotiate on par with others that are looking at these markets as well. So buyers, agents, professional investors, a lot of focus on really key growth markets across the country. Once we sort of arm ourselves with this approach and knowledge and tools, we can really compete in these markets very well. That's what I'll demonstrate in a moment as well. So jumping through this really quickly, I did ask the question in our emails, getting everyone's excited for this webcast, breaking down the top 10 suburbs that we did cover in the National Top 10 Sweet Spot Report. That was on the back of Terry Ryder's research from hotspotting.com.au. So check out his website. He's an amazing source of unbiased. This is my first probably recommendation as far as unbiased, respected suburb and regional level hotspotting. Absolute no-brainer as far as the source there and quality of that information. That's an expert that I would listen to, I suppose. That report is available for purchase at $154. Region, suburb, street and property level research. And as I mentioned, by popular demand from the Facebook post that we did have accompanying the registration page, Liverpool has been requested as the place people want to find out about. So let's jump into Liverpool in a moment. We're going to be analysing Liverpool. How would you purchase there for capital growth? What are some concerns we might need to look for? Terry does dissect in that report some information around what he sees as the growth drivers, how he defines and justifies Liverpool being at 7 or 8 o'clock on the property clock, how he potentially justifies Liverpool not being further closer to 12 o'clock like the rest of Sydney. What are the growth drivers that he sees in Liverpool that are separated from the overall Sydney market? That is in the report. Stocks moving quickly. Whenever you sort of see a suburb at 7 or 8 o'clock on the property clock, sales volumes are increasing. That's one of the reasons why we've been drawn to it. So stocks starting to move quite quickly. You're getting a lot of interest into the market from hotspotters or professional investors, etc. So you need to make these decisions quickly. I'm going to show you some tools now that we can perform this street level appraisal and property level appraisal really quickly. And we can do this for every suburb across Australia, 24/7. That's going to help us with our due diligence process. Okay, so I'm just going to switch screens there. Let me know when you can see a map on the page. Won't be a second. So let's just break this out a bit. Excuse me. I do apologise about that. Where are we now? I'll present that to everyone. Okay, so what you can see there, I'm just going to refresh the page there because I've been doing a bit of pre-research. What you can see loading is the Liverpool suburb. Within the backbone of the Ripe House platform is the suburb level analysis page. So this is where you become these local area experts for every suburb across Australia, how you can potentially buy in these suburbs for growth that's going to outperform the market, but at least not underperform the market. So avoiding potential, high public housing, high crime, bad amenity, funny owner-occupier or tenant mixes, etc. How we can potentially avoid these. So I won't go into too much detail because I really am aware of the time. There's so many features on this page that we can potentially cover. We can see all current for-rent properties. We've aggregated these listings from across the internet to save your research time in one place. They're all red icons on the map. You can see the full listing history and days on market for them, so you can capitalise on distressed sales that way. You can view current for-rental properties as icons on the map with the button over on the bottom left. You can see sold properties that have sold in the last 12 months on the map there with a toggle over in the bottom left there. One of the real key pieces of information, I did just notice in that 2-bedroom houses were the most in-demand property type, which was the drop down there that just folded away. That's going to be key for us in a moment. Suburb level median price is what I'm sort of drawn to first, and the quartile spread, which is really important. So 535 is the upper quartile price, 440 is the median, 380 is the lower. Now that's not going to mean anything to us in a moment, because once we apply sweet spots to the map and focus on the core investment grade streets, and then do some filtering around the types of property that we're looking at, we're going to have our new point of truth, which is going to help us compare apples with apples, our new quartile pricing spread. You can do lots of really cool things at a suburb level. So you can see neighbouring suburbs that also have high capital growth potential, neighbouring suburbs that have high flipping potential, cash flow potential, and you can even view flood zones on the map for a lot of the Brisbane regions. Then you can, more importantly, filter properties in and out of those flood zones. You can add any other property that's not on the market to the map, which may be already in your portfolio, and you can perform market appraisals on those properties. So a really quick intro. A lot of what I'm going to be able to do today is save a lot of these filters for us. So we can go back to and load the suburb up every day in our My Suburbs list, and you can apply these filters quickly. So you can do this daily to get your latest hot list of suburbs. So anyone who's having a blurry problem, it is backed on the Google on air platform, so it is really reliable, but you will receive a link to a recording which is on YouTube, which is very clear generally. So when we're coming to these suburbs, we've got lots of quick look information that we can get hold of. Now, when we're at Ripe House, we're not really paying a huge amount of attention to previous price growth or history. We're looking at current on-market growth and comparing that to the last year to see a trend, because this is what's important. It's getting a firm assessment of current trends in the market. So we can see that price growth is really trending upwards, obviously very highly, but we're also seeing it trending upwards of days on market. Sales volume is quite stable, vacancy rate's quite stable, but we are seeing a spike of late within yields as well. So yeah, that's probably just a really quick key there to say we don't really go back too far as growth trends or growth numbers. It's really looking at the market today. What's our current state of affairs, and look to the current state of affairs to predict future growth. So that's what it's all about. Next, there's lots of more information in those pop-ups. I won't go through them all. You can also compare Liverpool to its closest 10 neighbours on a lot of the key metrics, which is great for flipping between suburbs quickly, identifying other suburbs with similar characteristics, and potentially finding ugly ducklings or price discrepancies there amongst neighbours. But what I really wanted to show you is where how you can visualise on a map exactly where things are located. So obviously you've got amenities, the 3 key amenities. You can see those on the map very quickly. You can see investment hotspots. So the green areas here are actually dead spots as far as price. So underperforming, previously underperforming, lower price pockets of property. The blue ones are they're only very small areas in this case. In some suburbs, these larger areas. These are probably the blue areas are the peaks of the mountain, and the green areas are the troughs of the valley. So you can sort of see the price terrain there quickly. You can see exactly where the higher yielding areas. So you can see a lot of these higher, darker yellow areas through the west and the northern part of the suburb. The darker the yellow, the higher the yield. So we divide the suburb up into all of these small little sections. You can hover over any of these sections and you can view the individual information for that particular pocket. So if you've got a 7% minimum yield requirement for your strategy, you might have normally written Liverpool off, but you can actually see that this street area will give you that 7% yield. So you can actually filter properties based on their street location and their yield requirements. And you can quickly see where the higher yields are in the suburb. You can see where the higher incomes are there in the purple, where the higher rents are. So definite bias towards the west here for higher rents and the northwest. You can see where the higher purchase prices are generally located. You can see, now this is where we're starting to sort of break things down in regards to the sweet spots. So if you can remember, we've got to focus on the streets that have a lot of the in-demand property type, and in this case, that was units. So we've got to focus on the darker yellow patches here. The darker the yellow, the more units. Once again, we can click on this, and this particular pocket's got 100% units over here. These pockets through here, as an example, have 88% units, 96% units. So lots of units in these yellow areas. These green areas are very dense within houses. So some of these areas have no units. You've got to get that right. What are people currently demanding to live in the suburb? And that's going to be the backbone of the demand and potential for the price growth. So you've got to get that right. Occupancy type, we want to focus on where tenants are demanding. So you can see here, the darker the yellow, the higher percentage of tenants. And there's a very, very strong correlation in this suburb between tenants and units. Owner occupiers preferring houses, potentially avoiding houses. Sometimes too many owner occupiers, they do improve their street appeal of their property and renovate and take pride, etc. Capital growth sometimes on the back of that. But that's capital growth at a property level and not necessarily organic growth on the back of the demand drivers in the suburbs. So focusing on streets that have a nice mix between tenants and owner occupiers is always a good thing. Between a minimum level of tenants to make sure you've got strong tenancy demand that's going to drive your rental growth and your capital growth on the back of, and still some owner occupiers to improve the street appeal of the suburb. The street overall is the optimum mix. Public housing is another big one. So the darker the red here, the higher the public housing. 7% public housing in Liverpool, 4.4% in New South Wales overall. This particular red pocket here has 52% public housing. That would be a dramatic negative effect on street appeal, vacancy rates, quality of tenancies, ability to increase rents, etc. In those streets in that 52% public housing block. It's critical to know where this is on the suburb and street level. You can go into lots of detail there. I haven't gone into lots of detail now because I'm aware of time, but this can all be tied together very easily by using our sweet spot toggle at the top. Now this is going to pop up a dialog. We can click on the master strategy override. This is going to be a capital growth sweet spot override. So as soon as I click this badge, it's going to adjust the tolerances here for each of the metrics I just went through and show us only the streets in the suburb that qualify for us with the Ripe House sweet spot. So this 53 street areas in the suburb overall. Each of those areas has 200 dwellings. When I click this button, it's now readjusted our tolerances for these things based on the slide that I showed you before around what we accept as a sweet spot. When I do that, you can see all of these have been adjusted automatically. It's just spat out the bottom. 3 areas currently selected that qualify as a Ripe House sweet spot, which is, according to our research, going to outperform the rest of the suburb overall by over 20%. Let's apply that. They are all clustered together very nice and neatly in this one little section of the suburb. Now we've got 90 properties on the market at the same time. We don't want to be going through them all. We can click in here and we can filter properties just located in those sweet spots. 2 or 3 bedders and apartments are the property type that we need to focus on based on the in-demand property type. I do know, in Liverpool that lots of townhouses, which is actually the most in-demand property type, we describe them as units, apartments, townhouses that are all clumped together for the purposes of this. So this has basically gone away now, and it's actually found 10 properties that pass muster. We've obviously come down from 90 very quickly to the key 10. We can remove some outliers off the map there. We've got some really nice tools for further filtering of properties. But now we've got a nice, neat list of 10 properties that are ordered in terms of price. Now, we've obviously got our personal restraints around strategy. We can click on any of these properties and we can view a pop-up which shows us lots of information. What I'm going to do now, and this is a really quick run through, I could devote a whole webcast to this process because it's really important for us to become local area experts at a property level in these suburbs. We've got to be making firm judgment calls about assessing value and condition of these properties and comparing them like for like to other comparables that are actually comparable. Okay, so the first step in doing that is assessing the images of the photo. Obviously, this is not perfect. We're not able to inspect every property that's currently in these sweet spots across the country. But to start with, at this level of due diligence, let's look at the individual images and assess condition. I've got a framework for doing that. Street appeal, neutrality of presentation, it's not cluttered, etc., no tenants, renovated, condition of kitchen, bathroom, floor plan, and any localised unique requirements, as in high set, low set in Brisbane. Combining all those things on a scale of poor, average, and good to get a spitting out assessment of the property. Now you can do that, and we should be doing that, and this property is obviously primed very nicely as good condition. It's basically off the plan, which is about as good as you can get. Our algorithm assesses condition of the property and compares it to its neighbours with similar conditions. So based on the keywords used by the agent in this case, it's actually got it wrong. It wasn't too sure of things. It's been thrown off the case. When I come in here and override that, so this is an algorithm that automatically assesses condition of property, and it's something unique to Ripe House. And when I come in here and override this to good, a new feature that we've released lately will learn from how I've overridden that, and it's going to get better. So when it looks at Liverpool and other suburbs that are like it, it's going to actually see how we've overridden it. It's going to look to this listing and it's going to adapt things into the future, and it's getting better and better every day. So our algorithm for assessing condition is getting better. It's not taking all of the weight off your shoulders in assessing the property in question, but what it's doing is helping us go away and find comparables that are going to be more likely to be in a similar condition. So what it's done there, it's gone away and found the top 5 most relevant comparables. It's listed them there in a list. We can obviously see this one down the bottom here at 240 as the cheapest property on this list of 5 is inferior. The next one that comes through at 360 seems to be all inferior. This one coming in here is relatively similar. So we can do this process and we can curate this list and really own it, because the process of owning these comparables is really important. I won't take you through this whole process because this is another webcast in it. Actually get this pretty right for you, because if you go away and you get a generic valuation report, it's just going to pick top 5 comparables based on the normal numbers. So recency of sale, distance away, and same number of bedrooms and accommodation type. That's not going to give you the top 5 comparables. It's just going to pick 5 at random that meet those mix. Our process is going to be more likely to give you comparables that are in a similar condition, but it's also going to allow you to override these comparables, which is absolutely critical in making sure we've got a reliable appraised value. And it's also going to allow us to potentially negotiate under market, because we can call out the agent who's trying to artificially increase the asking price by including comparables that we've already assessed as superior. So we've removed those. We've got our list that we're comfortable with. We can then vet and critique the agent's list of comparables and try and muddy the waters there and try and get them to understand the true value proposition of the property. So a really important process there. It's going to take the 5 comparables through an amazingly robust comparable system here at Ripe House into an appraisal tab. So it's starting off with that baseline appraisal. You can remember those graphs that I had before, which talked about different adjustments based on location of property. You can see those adjustments there in real life. It's applied to this property. It's changed our expectation of value for this property, and we can then compare that against asking price. That can all be printed off in a report. You can do that for every property that comes up in the list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, all the way through. It's giving us an amazing power in being confident in our decision-making process and vetting it. Now, at any time using the software, you have any questions, we've got the online chat bar down the bottom. You can click there and you can jump right into any of our investment experts here to answer any questions that you might have. We've got 1300 number for other verbal questions and support email in any way in using the software. If you wanted to bounce an appraisal off any of us, we're always happy to answer those questions. If you've got any queries about how to use the software, suburb hotspots, street level hotspots, any of our research or anything, we're on hand, because we're investors helping you as other investors use the software. That's what it's all about. I'm just going to switch back over. If you've got any questions, I'll jump onto them at the end. around the software and the sweet spotting process, and then around Liverpool as well. We can see that there's 10 key properties, I think, on the market in Liverpool. I will, do definitely check out the replay to see the individual streets we did recommend there, and also then reference back to the report, the National Top 10 Sweet Spots report, because those sweet spots are also replicated in that report there. Just skipping through, I am aware of the hour mark coming up and everyone's lunch break almost been over. I am switching back now to the individual slides. Skipping through now, just I wanted to make this point quite clear. When we're assessing this value based on images, which is great to do, we're putting the property into 3 buckets. That's okay, and that's the first step in property appraisal. If we get down to the last steps of the due diligence before making an offer, we can really get serious about our inspections. Get the agent to run through with a video camera, all these sort of things you can potentially use to be sure of the condition. But when we are assessing condition, make sure you're assessing condition based on the suburb overall. It has to be like for like. Just to summarise really quickly, infographic number 3, which is all about buying below market. So check out the Ripe House blog once again for that. Assessing value first is obviously the first step we need to make in potentially buying below. We need to be sure of our appraised value for a property before we can even attempt to negotiate under it. We need to be, pretty confident in a fairly, a condition assessment of the property that represents the property. Then we can actually go away and find comparables that are in a similar condition, have recently sold, and in a similar location within the suburb. So that doesn't mean next door. It means in a similar location in terms of public housing, those Ripe House sweet spot characteristics, etc. They're going to be apples with apples. Then we're going to apply any location-based adjustments to the appraised figure, and then we're going to have the fair market value for the property. Then we can potentially look at days on market, if it's a bit stale, if there's been any revisions in the sales history, you're feeling the distress signals coming from the vendor, you've got lots of public housing around, etc. People have been thrown off the scent in the past. You're questioning those comparables all the way through. You're really priming that process of conversation with the selling agent to negotiate with the vendor on your behalf. That's what it's all about. If you wanted to check out our buyer's guide to property investment or the Know Your Purchase Strategy ebooks, they're available on the blog as well. Just register your email address there in the bottom right-hand corner of that page and they'll pop through to your inbox. That goes through in a little bit more detail about what we mean in doing these things. So the Ripe House community is a subscription service, and just getting through this really quickly and getting to the questions. I know time is there, but we are always leading the way with private members-only research, help and support, and group webinars that are going to stop you having analysis paralysis, going to give you confidence in your decision-making process, and going to stand by your side and help you do this together. We're going to provide you with Ripe House tools, which is every suburb across Australia, 24/7 access, and then on hand to answer any questions. So it's like the professionals potentially approach these problems and due diligence process. These are the tools potentially that they're using to research and do what you're trying to do. And then as part of the subscription, we have private masterclass sessions. So once a month, I'll hold these sessions out to the subscribers, potentially, which is how we can engage going forward. In you sitting through, I'm looking at this particular suburb, this particular street, this particular property, what are your thoughts? And we can go through all of these things together, one after the other. Yeah, just a little bit about other people in the industry and what they've got to say about Ripe House. We've got some amazing quotes here from Terry Ryder from hotspotting.com.au, from Jane Stake-Smith from The Ultimate Guide to Renovation. Do look out for Jane as an amazing educator and provider of thought leadership in how to potentially buy properties, how to renovate properties for profit in today's market. Dave Ward from a buyer's agency who's using the tool. We've got lots of buyer's agents who use our research and Ripe House tools. And then Guy Williams over there on the right is the successful investor. I was only actually talking with Guy yesterday. I think he just purchased his 31st property. Big shout out to Guy and good job on that last one there, mate. He described it as a money box. Lots of amazing research. So it is a leading provider. Ripe House is a leading provider of research and tools to help in lots of different ways and in lots of different research methods. So just jumping forward, Ripe House is usually a subscription service. It's usually available at $7.97 per year. That provides you unlimited access to the research and tool set for that whole year period. I'd love to offer you, as a thank you for coming along today, a special offer. Now you can lock this special offer in over on the right-hand side of the screen there by pressing the subscribe to Ripehouse button. But this basically opens up to you a $100 discount off the normal annual price down to $697 per year. But it's also going to open up one-on-one investment coaching with myself personally, taking you through the journey. We'll jump into the top 10 sweet spots report, or we'll look at your personal preferences. We'll go in, jump on Skype, and we'll go in that process together to get you started very quickly. So that's my commitment to you. If you do lock in today's special offer, for coming along and joining us on this webcast, which I do really appreciate you taking the time out to do. Yeah, you can lock this bonus in if you don't want to use the button over there on the side. It's only available today. It will expire this evening. You can click on the subscribe to Ripehouse button, or you can just jump straight into the www.ripehouse.com.au/bonus page. You will notice that's the normal Meet Ripehouse page, but there is an updated number, which is $697, which is that $100 discount which is activated for today. So you can jump onto that URL there right now to do that. I will be also sending an email out which will have those details. As an extra added bonus and a big thank you for joining us, I'd love to also offer you, in addition to the $100 discount and one-on-one coaching by myself, free copy of the National Top 10 Sweet Spot Report. So this is a real cheat sheet that you can use as a Bible going forward for the next few months, for the remainder of 2015, potentially, as a real a guide to region, suburb, street, and property level research, leveraging the research tools of Terry Ryder at hotswelling.com.au with our sweet spot level, street level analysis. So jump in. This is an amazing offer, and I'm really proud to put it together for you today. Once again, the URL there is www.ripehouse.com.au/bonus, and there is live chat and phone or email support if you've got any questions. Just so you know, last week we did transition away from PayPal over to Stripe. Now, Stripe is across the whole world. It's used so it's not just in Australia. It's an amazingly powerful payment platform. It's incredibly secure. None of your details actually come through to us. They go straight to Stripe and are processed and held there. It's basically best practice and leading the way with payment processing on the internet in 2015. We've been wanting to move across to it for quite a while, and we're really proud to have actually done that last week. So that's who facilitates payment within Ripehouse, and it's backed up by Stripe and then security in doing that. So if you've got any questions with that, jump into the chat as well. But I am aware of time. I'll jump onto a couple of questions that I do have here already. If you do miss out and if you do need to get back to work, don't get to your questions, I will wrap it up at 1:30. Jump into my personal email or phone there. And I will take a couple of minutes out now just to get the questions coming through and getting the answers back. So jump in with any questions you've got there. Don't forget that special offer, which is a big thank you for coming. If you don't want to stick around for questions, I really appreciate your time. I hope you found it insightful and a little bit of an eye-opener into property investment done right. I suppose property investment into the future and potentially a new way of looking at how to invest, because this is something I think you can do yourself as a DIY property investor. So I'll pop the mute button on for a moment. I'll collate these questions and I'll come back with some answers in a moment. Okay, so do keep those questions coming through. You can ask them via the chat or the question bar. The first question is from Isabel, who's just talking about, we did have she wanted to know about some of the other suburbs in the top 10 sweet spot report. There was, I won't go into, definitely check out the report. They were heavily focused around Queensland, so lots of movement and activity up there at the moment. Logan, Morayfield, which is in the whole Moreton Bay region, and then this whole Sunshine Coast region, which is Caloundra was picked out. We've got Liverpool and Wollongong in New South Wales down into Albury. Forgive me if I'm missing out a couple here. We've got Geelong. We've also got Epping and Cranbourne in Melbourne, and then over to Mandurah in Perth. Interestingly, yeah, no Northern Territory, ACT, potentially Tasmania, probably the wrong time in the property clock for some of those. South Australia was on the verge, and there are some key markets. So I did actually have a webcast a couple of weeks ago with Terry Ryder, Peter Kaluzos, the property professor, and Michael Whitrow from the Real Team Buyers Agents in Adelaide, and they did like what they were seeing in some of the key markets through there. So Adelaide probably just missed muster for this National Top 10 Sweet Spot report, but we've got Salisbury, the Charles Sturt local government area, and also the, forgotten the local government area, but we're just talking inner west between the city and the airport as that inner west local government just south of Charles Sturt, which were on the verge and potentially, or, you know, on the verge, well, I suppose, in summary. Sangeetha has just come through and mentioned which part of Cranbourne. In our sweet spot analysis and suburb level analysis, just vetting Terry's recommendation for Cranbourne overall, it was very closely correlated in demand, and future price growth was very closely correlated to the train hub as a transport hub within Cranbourne. So look to win the Cranbourne itself, and there are a number of sweet spots in there where tenant demand is driving that growth in and around the key amenities. Is buying close to, I'm sorry, I'm just going through that, literally the conversation, Sangeetha, that you're having there, and it's probably not related to Cranbourne, but I will just get to it very quickly. Is buying close to a massive power line a good or bad idea? Obviously, it's probably going to, anything that, you know, could negatively affect the buying pool of who might be interested in the property is going to negatively affect demand for that property, and growth is, so current price for a property is building in previous demand, and it may be already built into that price, but anything that may detract from future demand potentially may detract from future growth. So obviously things like power lines, sewage treatment plants, you know, the only part of the suburb that doesn't have a water view, all of these things obviously may decrease the buying pool of people interested. So suburbs which are gentrifying, and you've got a whole new demographic of people coming to the suburb, which may be young dinks, double income, no kids, you know, the latte set, etc. They might be not attracted to live in the streets next to the industrial area. So it is a very subjective thing, suburb by suburb. Obviously, it does have an effect, a negative effect on appraised value on demand. However, in probably more specific to your question, it's very hard to correlate and map those things on a map and then map them back to price. Well, it's obviously possible, and everything's possible, I think, and obviously in the future it's something that we can definitely look at. We are looking at bringing in different zoning as our next rollout of functionality, different zoning areas, and mapping that back to price. FUD zones were our previous, and we're always looking at things that do map and correlate to price, and then providing those to our users. Just going back here, there was a question from Peter. You're not actually able to filter new versus old apartments, which is, you know, it is key, but sometimes it comes back to the agent themselves. Sometimes they're not overly open and disclose the condition of a unit, and do make old sound like new. Obviously, probably not new sound like old. It's difficult for us to pick that up automatically across every suburb across Australia. So that's why we don't provide it. Yeah, potentially that's something that we can look at in the future. Might be worth reaching out to us, and we can have a conversation about exactly what you're needing. And there may be a way we can actually use the software to do that already by using some of the filters that we have. Jason, how often is the Top 10 Sweet Spot report released? Is it free report to subscribers? So yes, as part of the webcast subscription promotion today, I've already sent it to all current Ripehouse subscribers, and I will be providing it to current subscribers of Ripehouse from today. And listeners that do subscribe from today's webcast. As far as when it's how often is it going to be released? Now, I think obviously suburbs move in and out of this, and Dubbo basically sat around at the national top 10 hotspot report, I think, from Terry for quite a few years, and it's just dropped off from memory. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Some of these suburbs have a longer lifespan than others. So we'll probably, I'll talk to Terry about regularly vetting these suburbs and moving them in and out, potentially on a quarterly schedule, which is to be confirmed based on what we're seeing with the suburbs that we have selected. I will leave it there. I am aware of time, unless you've got any further questions that you'd like to jump in quickly before I go. Definitely jump into www.ripehouse.com.au/bonus. You'll be presented with two big buttons there, which is Meet Ripehouse on the one there that's clicked $697 is the $100 annual description. Sangeetha, you've just asked a question around Springfield Lakes at Brisbane. Now, obviously I spend a lot of time in and around suburbs. I'll jump in there for you and I'll give my thoughts just really quickly before we jump off the line. If any of you want to call it there, I can do some individual suburb level research for you all now if you'd like. Just really quickly, I probably won't go into the property level, but I can sort of give my thoughts on the suburb and what might be the growth drivers. If you want to leave it there and get back to work, etc., I really do appreciate your time and really thank you for coming along. And also for you, those of you who have sticked around to the end, it's been a great turnout in staying to the end. So I'll share my screen, Sangeetha. I'll go back to the tool and I'll see what I can pick up here in Spring Lakes. To be honest, Springfield Lakes is not jumping out at me as a suburb that I've been looking at or familiar with in recent times. And that might not necessarily mean anything, but it hasn't jumped out at me in the core growth regions I've sort of been tracking recently. But there's lots of obviously suburbs in Brisbane. So we can do a search here. We've got very robust search tools within Ripehouse. So you can jump in here and you can order. So if you're setting Brisbane as your catchment area, etc., you can actually rank suburbs and have them returned to you in order of our recommended capital growth metrics. That looks at sales volumes and rent volumes, rent per week increases, and map suburb versus suburb. You can also find suburbs that might be more likely and suited to growth in a flipping strategy or a cash flow strategy. So we've got some really robust search tools there within Ripehouse. Springfield Lakes. So we can do that search. It will return a suburb list for us and we can actually click through that way. We can do it through our My Suburbs list, which is basically our running shortlist, or we can obviously direct input the suburb name there and go that way. So let's load up Springfield Lakes. I'm just trying to get my bearings. Lots of properties on the market. 4-bedroom houses are most common, comparatively high number of renters, a very low crime rate compared to state, below average concentrations of public housing. So just a really quick summary of what's come into it. Where are we? So we're over towards Ipswich. So we have focused on Ipswich in a recent webcast. Lots going on. We actually had the Mayor of Ipswich come on and speak. We had local property manager, a local developer, and Terry Ryder come on and speak. So do seek out that webcast on our Ripehouse YouTube channel for further information about Ipswich. That was a big sentence, I'm sorry. But I'm not positive, and this is going to be an interesting dynamic here with Springfield Lakes, because it's not really Brisbane and it's not really Ipswich. It's in the middle and it's just off the major M2 commuter hub. So the dynamic there may be hit or miss as far as the growth drivers of Ipswich itself, and then over into obviously sort of inner south of Sydney. Brisbane itself has some individual growth drivers, and then obviously over into Logan has some individual growth drivers at the moment. First step potentially would be zooming out, focusing on the area, then we can click on this capital growth overlay. The darker the blue, the higher the capital growth score, according to our metric. This is a numbers-based score, so Terry obviously goes into a lot more detail as an example at the real human sort of research level and ticks the boxes that way. This is a good starting point. It's a good, darker the blue, higher the capital growth score. And it might get it wrong at an individual suburb level, but when you see groups of blue together, it's very powerful. So you've obviously got a very large group of blue over here in the northern part of Ipswich. You've got a little bit of a group of blue around Camera and Bellwood Park, and you've got a lot of blue over here on the M7 on the way into the south of the city. You don't have any blue in Springfield Lakes, according to this metric. I I just want to also check if it's in a flood zone as well. So that's going to go away and also show us if there's going to be any flood affected areas. On the map here, we cannot see any flood affected areas within this suburb. So I just wanted to make sure that was okay. So I'm not really going to comment too much, Sangeetha, on the capital growth upside of this particular suburb, only to say it hasn't come up on any of my radars using any of my metrics to date. So that's probably can be read into a little bit. I do just want to check really quickly if there are any definable sweet spots for you. I won't go into any of the other street level sweet spots. We can literally just come in here and it's found 4 sweet spots. They are centered very closely. So we've got one outlier over here, but we've got 3 that are congregated together, which I really like to see. So they are congregated around what looks to be the central sort of business and transport district here in the center of the suburb, and then they go westward right to the border of the suburb. So they are the clusters there that have low public housing, high tenant demand, between 30 and 70% tenants, higher than average rents, higher than average yields, and lots of the in-demand property type, which are those 4-bedder houses. Just to see also where public housing is, so there are a couple of spots of public housing, not much at all, so nothing above 3% or to worry about. Interestingly enough, geographically, particularly these 2 hotspots here are within around 1 kilometre of the Springfield platform. So it's in that amenity sweet spot, which is around that kilometre. Not right on the doorstep, but not too far away. I hope that answers your question, Sangeetha. And Jennifer, I'll jump into, so yeah, pull me in, and if you want to jump on chat at any time for any further sort of questions around Springfield, etc. Jennifer, you wouldn't mind checking out Kalangar, Kalangur, forgive my pronunciation there. So 3-bedroom houses, high number of renters, which is good. It means we might have more chance of finding some more sweet spots in the suburb. Obviously, if you come into a suburb that only has an average of 15% owner occupiers, there's going to be far fewer sweet spots. So it's around 50% of every suburb. So 50% of suburbs actually have sweet spots from memory, and only around 15% of each of those suburbs are the sweet spots. The more the more levels of tenants, when you're getting up to a 50-50 split, you're far more likely to have more sweet spots in a suburb. Lots of property on the market at the moment. I'm just getting my bearings right smack bang in the Moreton Bay sort of improvements in the rail line, as you've mentioned there. Talking with Terry, and he does go into some detail in the National Top 10 Sweet Spots report. You've got the whole Redcliffe Peninsula into Deception Bay, up into Caboolture Morayfield, positively affected by the improvements in rail infrastructure in the area. So for more information, definitely check out the hotspotting.com.au on the specifics of that infrastructure improvement. This is definitely right in that zone of spikes and increases in demand caused by that infrastructure. So ticks that box as far as I can see. Let's do our capital growth overlay. So once again, you can see a lot of blue focus around the area, and Kalangar is smack bang in the middle of this blue and scoring very highly there for its capital growth potential, and that's a relative measure. So the darker the blue, the higher the relative capital growth potential for this suburb versus its neighbours. So that's all ticking the box. So as far as the hotspot, suburb level hotspot, I'm really liking what I'm seeing here. Let's once again check out where some sweet spots are. We've got 4 sweet spots currently selected. If we zoom in, 2 of them are grouped together, which obviously I really like. One of them up here near the train line, another random one over here. Public housing, we've got a 3% average, which is quite low for the suburb. This particular pocket over here has 29.1%, so definite red flag, with that level of public housing. Just as a bit of a general rule, at the 345 suburb median, which is current on market for sale median, I'll define that in Australia's terms as low to middle socioeconomic. And according to our research, anything over 15% of the street level is starting to have a negative effect on that sweet spot demand. 15% is our maximum buffer for sweet spots at that socioeconomic area. So this is not going to qualify, obviously. Some of these other darker areas at 8% are not are going to qualify. It would only be this really rich dark red area that would fall through that and have a big red mark against it. We might like to filter the in-demand property type just so we can see how many might be on the market there, Jennifer, because this is what we really need to focus on. So 345 is our current suburb median. We need to sort of work out what you're sort of expected to pay for 3 or 4 better houses in these sweet spots, because it might be more and it might be less, but that's our point of truth. With this many suburbs on the map, sometimes this takes a few seconds. Deborah's just coming through there with some requests around Ipswich. I am aware of time there, Deborah, but I went into a lot of detail, and I think it was an hour-and-a-half podcast, webcast there with, as I say, those local area experts for Ipswich. I'll send you through the link personally after the event, just so you can jump in there and view it, because I did go into a lot of detail around these individual suburbs. Yeah, so we've got 15 houses that are currently on the map for sale in these areas. Some of them are actually coming up as lot numbers, which potentially are new block developments. So you sort of look out for that. It is coming up as lot 250, but it is a 4-bedroom. So my assumption there is that it actually is a off-the-plan sale, which might be sort of muddying the waters there. So depending on what your strategy is, depending on if you're looking at doing renovation or not, you might be looking at poor condition properties or good condition properties, which are going to suit what you're trying to achieve. Just a bit of a flag there. There seems to be a lot of off-the-plan, brand new, obviously good condition properties, which might not suit you. 7 Castle Court here at 349 is one that's jumping out at me. In the sweet spot, nice, reasonably well presented for sale, but obviously unrenovated. You know, you could come in here and you could put a new kitchen in this, floating floors, paint it white. What's the bathroom like? Fit out the bathroom and compete very nicely against these off-the-plan properties for purchase price. I did skip through that. I did actually misclick then and went back to the previous suburb, but I hope that's giving you a bit of an insight. You can do that for any suburb across Australia, and as part of obviously the subscription of the annual level membership, I'm on hand to work with you in doing this on a one-to-one level. So I'll leave it there. Sangeetha, Deborah, Jennifer, thanks for your questions in particular. I'll pop through the links around Ipswich for you, and we're on hand for any questions at any time. Thank you.